All right, so we're going to go into the next presentation, and the individual coming up, Samuel Kiwasz, he is a good friend of ours and actually has been kind of like working with us and vending at our events and supporting us ever since 2011, in which he was actually a vendor at our first conference, the Cosmic Reunion 2012, and our second conference, Cosmic Reunion 4th Density. And he is a plethora of information. He used to be a teacher, and now his real passion is sacred geometry. And as every year passes, his presentations increase too, because his awareness of what sacred geometry is and what it means for, our ancient past and for the evolution of our consciousness is always evolving as well. So let's all put our hands together and do a warm welcome for Samuel Kiwasz.
Good afternoon. This talk is about sacred geometry, and sacred geometry is about oneness. And by understanding the principles of sacred geometry, you can understand what oneness is about on many levels. And so I wanted to share with you some of the information I've gathered over the years. In fact, about 20 years ago, I got a job teaching 6th grade math, science, inner city for LA Unified, and I was looking for a way to turn the kids on to math. And so I created original curriculum called Geometric Drawing, the Math Art Connection. And I had my 6th graders doing geometric constructions, and they created their own mandalas. We showed them in the auditorium and during the winter concert on the screen in front of the whole school. And my mind took a blank. Anyways, after doing that, and I also taught a seminar for math teachers with full metaphysics for 10 years. And after 10 years, I wanted to test the system, so I changed the title to Sacred Geometry, the Math Art Connection. And all of a sudden, I was uninvited to the California Math Conference, where I taught up to 100 teachers at a time. And I went public, and I've been doing these PowerPoint things ever since. Something happened to me about 6 months ago that was a big change in my life. I was working on my body. I was going to the gym 3 times a week with a personal training class, and I was about to start my workout. I was standing on a treadmill, and a car, a brand new Mercedes SUV, crashed through the glass wall and hit the treadmill I was on. The treadmill hit my head and my nose, and I went flying, and I had to roll to the right in order to avoid being crushed by the treadmill. So a lot of my last 6 months have been engaged in healing, and it's been a very interesting and challenging time. So we'll see what we can do here. So this is titled Sacred Geometry, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Living. And sacred geometry has basic symbols, and one symbol leads to another. It's a natural progression that happens not only throughout nature, throughout the human bodies, all animals, the way planets revolve around each other. Even the structure of our galaxy is based on sacred geometry. And this is an interesting concept about the interrelationship of all things. The seed produces the tree produces the flower produces the fruit, and the fruit produces the seed, and it's a cycle that continues. We have a big orange tree in our backyard, and every year about this time, we have an abundance of oranges, and it just keeps going and going and going, and it's a real blessing to see nature produce like that. So there are dimensions that we have, and the 1 point is 0 dimension. 2 points make up a line, that's 1 dimension. 3 points can make a triangle, that's like when you're writing on a blackboard, that's 2 dimensions. And 4 points creates a pyramid or a 3-dimensional triangle. And that's 3 dimensions. And if a way of conceptualizing the next dimension, the 4th dimension, is if we take a cube, which is a 6-sided square, it's a 3-dimensional square, and we open it up in all 6 directions, it expands to the next level. It becomes a 4th dimensional square. So there's a progression through all things. And there was a crop circle that showed up in England, and it's called the 4th dimension. And if you look at it one way, it's like 3 dimensions. You look at it another way, and it almost like takes on another dimension. And then from there, we go to the pendant. I sell pendants. About 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to express what I was doing, because I was so consumed in it, with a pendant. So I searched the world till I found one that I liked, and I bought a Sri Yantra, and I started wearing it all over LA. And strangers were stopping me in the street and saying, "Where can I get one?" And the light went off in my head, and I started buying them wholesale. And ultimately, I ended up buying them from the family in India that makes them. And that's developed over the last 10 years into an amazing experience. My website is called sacredpendants.com, and I have over 60 different patterns. And this is the 5th dimension right here, the pentaract. And then we go from there to the 6th dimension. I had a customer call me up and say, can I get a 6th-dimensional pendant? I said, "What's that?" They say, "You tell me." So I went to Google Images, and I looked at all the 6th-dimensional pendants, and I found one that I really liked. And I had the people in India make these for me, and I ended up winning an award with it. It was so beautiful. The 6th dimension consciousness is oneness with the sparks of God within all souls and all life ever created by God and all that is everywhere. It can be called the miracle space. When we get up into the higher dimensions, miracles are not only possible, but they become commonplace. In fact, I was reading The Road Less Traveled many years ago by Dr. Stephen Peck, and he said that synchronicity is always happening, moment by moment. It's always there. We just have to raise our consciousness enough to realize it. So I've been doing stream of consciousness writing for a long time, and I sat down once and tried to get at the essence of what sacred geometry meant to me. And this is what came through. It captures the vital essence of the makeup of the universe. It presents in mathematical terms the secrets of how life is born from a single cell and grows into the magnificence of creation. It moves us from simplicity to duality and 3-dimensional manifestation gently, effortlessly, and freely. It is the miracle of creation unfolding in natural order according to new heights, ascending to new heights of understanding and human conceptual liberation. It allows us to be refreshed and reborn to the truth of who we are in a way that supports life. A good way to determine whether you want to get involved in any kind of teaching or movement is, does that support life? And it's a good gauge to go by to help you decide what you want to do. So, out of the void, before creation, came this bubble. This is based on the Akhenaten right eye of Horus school from ancient Egypt. And what happened was, from the void, essence moved out in all 3 directions. X, Y, and Z axis. Up and down, right and left, forward and back. And the edges of those were connected into a circle. And then the points were connected to the top. That formed a pyramid on top, and to the bottom, that's an octagon. And that started to spin, and then we have the first spiral or sphere. And then that created, on the first day of creation, it created itself. And then every day it created itself again and again and again. So after 6 days, just like in the book of Genesis, after 6 days, God rested. So you have the original sphere and 6 circles around it. And so that's a parallel. And then it goes on from there to form the seed of life. And I have a pendant in that regard. And then the seed of life opens up to the next level, and it becomes the flower of life. Remember, like the difference between the 3rd and the 4th dimension, where it opened up in all directions? Well, that's what happens with the seed of life, and it becomes the flower of life. And the flower of life is found on many ancient pyramids, monoliths, different walls, all through many cultures throughout the world. And here you have a flower of life in nature, and there's a flower of life pendant. And if every day is an awakening, you will never grow old. You will just keep growing. And I think that's part of what life is about. We just keep learning and growing. This is not a prison planet, it's a learning planet. And we have the spheres circling, harmony of the spheres. The rhythm of the body, the melody of the mind, the harmony of the soul create the symphony of life. So then, when you get all the circles and you connect the centers of all the circles to all the other circles, you have Metatron's cube. The 13 archangels of creation, the 13 spheres of Metatron's cubes, are representative of the 13 archangels that stand before God. Each archangel is a sacred keeper of the element of creation, and hence takes God's love and expands the field of creation infinitely in all directions in time and space. And Archangel Metatron, the way that the story goes, I believe it was Enoch that was so good that God whisked him into heaven on the chariot of fire. And then he became God's right-hand man. He became Archangel Metatron, God's scribe, and he's very well known for all the amazing information that people channel from him and the things that he does. So here's the Metatron's cube. And then we have the Platonic solids. Pythagoras formed a school. He was considered the father of sacred geometry. Father of geometry, excuse me. And then 300 years later, Pythagoras also added to it, and he noticed that these Platonic solids are all the building blocks of the universe, and all of these come out of the Metatron's cube, can be formed from Metatron's cube. And each of the Platonic solids represents a different aspect. Fire, tetrahedron; earth, hexahedron; air, octahedron; icosahedron is water, and dodecahedron is ether or prana. And also all the elements. Metatron's cube, get the Platonic solids, and the 92 elements of the periodic table are based on the 5 Platonic solids. So in some way we can say that the flower of life is fundamental to creation, and perhaps God's blueprint of life itself. And then if we go across to Italy, there was someone named Leonardo Pisano Bigelow, and he's popularly known as Leonardo Fibonacci. And he noticed a particular sequence when he watched how plants grow. And first one leaf would grow, and then another leaf would grow, and then the next day you add those 2 leaves, and 2 leaves would grow, and the next day, the previous day, and that day, so 3 leaves. So it's 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. There's a natural progression. And if you put the new growth over the growth from the day before, you have a fraction. And that fraction is a number just like pi, which is 3.14, and it goes on and on. There's no very exact number. It's also called the phi ratio. It's 1.618 ... So it goes over, under, gets closer to that exact point, but never exactly reaches it. You have the ratio. It's called the Fibonacci sequence. And then if you make rectangles and you connect the diagonals of each of the rectangle, you have a golden mean spiral, which is another fundamental symbol in sacred geometry. So what Fibonacci did was, if you take that spiral, it goes infinitely smaller and smaller and goes infinitely larger and larger. So the mind can't wrap itself around that because there's no base, there's nothing to work off of. So he created a base of 1, which gave the Fibonacci spiral a beginning point. So then there's a definite beginning which helps the mind deal with this spiral. And our bodies are based on this divine proportion. This point of the finger plus this point of this distance of the finger equals the whole finger. And you have that ratio throughout the entire body. And plants have it, and animals have it. This is a golden mean spiral. The vegetative universe opens like a flower from the Earth's center, in which is eternity. It expands from stars to the mundane shell, and there it meets eternity again, both within and without. William Blake was a famous poet in the late 1800s. He's a very spiritual poet. And we find this golden mean spiral throughout nature, in the plants, in the shells, in our ear. That's like similar to the baby in the fetal position, the shape of our ear, in our fingerprint, in vegetables and cabbage, flour. The spiral is a spiritualized circle. In the spiral form, the circle, uncoiled, unwound, has ceased to be vicious. It has been set free. I love that concept because we go through life in a circle. We keep repeating things over and over again, and we don't grow really until we break free of that circle, and then we're able to spiral up and move in a more positive upward direction. And the school of fish like to travel in spirals, and the ocean, and the weather patterns. And then this is a pendant. It's a golden mean spiral. So what I did was I made pendants for all the different aspects of sacred geometry, representing the different cultures throughout the world. And it sort of grabbed me like a bug, and I just kept going, and that's why I have so much diversity. It's probably, from a business sense, not practical to have so many different designs. But it's like I got obsessed, and I just kept going. Things are not always logical. So you have the spiral and the pine cone. And then this is the Vatican. And this is a big statue in the Vatican of a pine cone. And they may not tell you, but it actually represents the pineal gland. And that, I'm led to believe, is our connection to Source. Once we clear our pineal gland, we have a direct connection to Source, and we don't have to go to others for the answers. We can tune in ourselves and get answers that work for what our understanding and what our role is. And Tesla, he said, "My brain is only a receiver in the universe. There is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. I think he was being very humble, and he did penetrate. So we have these spirals, again, throughout nature, and you'll be seeing spirals all over, maybe after this talk. I, many years ago, read a book called Mandalas by Jose and Miriam Arguelles, and it had a lot of different mandalas that they drew. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning when I finished it, and everywhere that I looked, all I saw was mandalas. And it was like a hallucination, but it was very real. And it lasted for a half an hour. And then it just passed. But having had that experience, I can't deny it. And it's pretty phenomenal. And this is called the sunflower. It's a series of golden mean spirals. It's a very beautiful pendant. And that's a tube torus. It showed up as a crop circle in England, in the fields. These crop circles show up overnight. And some of them are man-made, but a lot of them are not. And some of them are so huge, it's hard to believe that they could have actually been made by man that quickly. And I've talked to people who have been there, and they've thought of certain things, and the next day they show up as crop circles. So it's an interesting dynamic. We're not sure actually who is making them, but it may be our wisdom from the future, advanced civilizations coming back to uplift us, and it may be a way for these beings, whoever makes them, to remind us of our wisdom from the past. But it's definitely something that supports life, and it's uplifting. Again, something worth checking into, and not just shoving under the rug. We have these spirals, and then we have the tube torus. And we have a tube torus around our body, and there's a tube torus around the earth. And it's an electromagnetic field, and the idea is to get our tube torus flowing, and so it's flowing with the harmony of the earth, and then we're in resonance. And our heart is very powerful. It's much more powerful than our brain. And once we get everything in the flow, then we become connected to that flow of the earth again. So there's the tube torus, and here's a nice little exercise for us to do for a moment. We inhale through the top of our head. We circulate the energy around our body and bring it up through our body, and then we exhale out through the top of our head. So let's do that. So inhale, circulate, exhale, and release. Inhale the good energy, circulate it, and exhale the bad energy. If you do that long enough, what it does is it gets us out of our head, which I particularly have a problem with that. I tend to think a lot, and gets us into our heart. You do that for 5 or 10 minutes, you'll find that you can feel a heart opening and just release into the stillness. It's a very, very simple technique to reset your state of being. Good way to start the day. And here's a very powerful symbol about how we activate our higher centers to connect with our higher self, which connects us to Source. And that's available to everybody. It's just a matter of remembering to do it consistently. Perhaps we are light traveling in form from birth in the Big Bang at the quantum level to all experience and rebirth on the cosmic level. Once reaching oneness, we are on towards a new experience and new awareness in the creation we have produced, the breakthrough to a new and better us. So again, it's about growth and experience, development and rebirth, and breaking out of our circle into the spiral, a circle that's been set free. We all need to set ourselves free. Here's a nice artistic spiral. To evolve, you need to dive into your own void, which a lot of times I have difficulty doing, because you have to stop the world and get off the chain and just surrender. Get out, dive into your own void. Most people are afraid of that, and so they keep looking outside for answers. But there's nothing out there, absolutely nothing. You're both creator, center, and creation, Taurus. I do stream of consciousness writing, and while I'm writing, a lot of times it doesn't make sense. But again, I have to get out of myself and surrender and allow the information to come through from my higher centers. And I'll look at it half an hour later, and it'll be great, great information. And I have a friend who does spiritual sadhana every day, and he's constantly saying, well, did you check your spiritual family about that? And he thinks, it's something that needs to be done on a regular basis to really open up that connection, that trust, that flow. Because a lot of times, even though I've done it hundreds of times, I distrust. You just have to trust and let go and go in and allow your higher centers, your source, to give you the information you need. This is called the tube Taurus pendant. We must begin to live in harmony with the laws that govern the universe. Wallace Wattles is the person, that famous movie that they made with all the spiritual teachers, The Secret? Yeah, he was the inspiration behind, he was a lot of the source information for that. The best 6 doctors anywhere, and no one can deny it, are sunshine, water, rest, air, exercise, and diet. This is my mother talking to me. She was a fanatic. She wanted the world, just like the last presentation, they were talking about changing the consciousness of our governments and how we relate to each other. She believed that if everybody ate raw food and practiced all the health principles, then not only would their bodies be clean, but their minds would be clean, and people would relate to each other in a totally different way. And she spent her life evangelizing about this. On the bus, she used to talk to strangers. When our friends came over, she used to try to talk them into this way of living. And my brother and sister and I actually were raised on mostly raw fruits and vegetables in the 50s and 60s. It was challenging, but it was healthy. And my mother wanted me to be a perfect example of health, so she could show off her kids to others. See what this does? And I felt like I never quite made it. But I was pretty healthy. So another thing to consider is a circadian rhythm. Different parts of the day, different aspects are being worked on. You get your deepest sleep at 1 a.m. You have your bowel movement at 8:30. It's just important to go into this. You can find out a lot of information online about the circadian rhythm. And when we get in touch with what nature wants for us, then we can have a greater success at being healthy. And it's also different areas of the body are focused during different times also. It's a whole science, and it's worthy of making note of it. Yep. Yep. And the thing about, it talks about melatonin. If you don't get enough sun during the day, then that produces serotonin. If you don't produce enough serotonin, then you don't produce enough melatonin in the evening, especially if you have lights on at night. So because of our lifestyle, it makes it hard to get good sleep for a lot of us, especially as we get older. Something to consider. And there's also different yoga movements that are good at different parts of the day. So sunlight is very important. It does tremendous benefits for the body and the mind. Improves metabolism, boosts immunity, improves sleep quality, support healthy bones. And we need the vitamin D, all of us, children, adults, infants. It's something that you can't emphasize enough. Of course, it has to be in balance. You can't have too much, but it's important to have enough. And of course, you have to bring your own sunshine with you. You have to smile. When you smile, you make other people smile, and you spread the sunshine throughout the people you meet. Another important aspect is water. A lot of us don't drink enough water. We don't remember to get our proper hydration, and everything depends on it. It does all these things for the body. Keeps your juices flowing, dissolves toxins, on and on and on. And another thing that I discovered, I was teaching for LA Unified for 22 years, and I was at the top of the salary scale. And I had been doing independent study for 9 years, and I got tired of sitting. I had a wonderful job. I had the best job in the school district, where I was getting kids that are turned off to education, and I was re-engaging them in education and trying to find out what they like and stimulating them in that direction. And their parents came in, and they were happy, and the kids were happy. But I was tired of sitting on my butt for 9 years. I had a wonderful office, but it's good to change things around every 10 years or so. And so I thought, there's a lot of people making money on the internet. I'm not a dummy, why can't I? So I kept my eyes open, and someone at a party once pulled one of these bottles out and said, I want you to see this. And it's called Miron glass. And it's special glass that's actually, it looks black, but it's actually violet if you look at it through the light. And what it does is it blocks out most of the visible light spectrum. Things stay fresher longer because light decomposes things, and it only allows violet, ultraviolet, and infrared into the bottle. The ultraviolet and infrared, they work synergetically to raise the frequency. So not only does it keep things fresher, but it raises the potency. So what I did was I started selling this glass, and then I added the sacred geometry to the symbols to the glass, and then affirmations underneath. And so when you put the three things together, synergistically, you have something that's very powerful as a tool for health. And I did this with the bottles and the jars, and I have a booth out here, and I have like over 30 different sizes. It started with this bottle. It was so expensive. When I saw it, I said, I'm not gonna pay this. So I bought it wholesale. And it grew from one item to 30 items, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years also. So it's important to engage in things that are life positive, support life, and that you have a strong feeling for, because chances are that will get you through the rough times, because no matter what business it is, it's going to change. Change is always in the air, and sometimes you have periods of where there's no interest, and it's only that enthusiasm that gets you through those periods. Anyways, moving on. Another important aspect which a lot of people in this culture are suffering from is lack of rest. We forget to slow down and smell the roses. Take rest. A field that has rested gives a bountiful crop. Every 7 years, they say you let the field rest. It's important, especially when you're growing a baby. Don't knock the benefits of relaxation. A refreshed soul can be a truly creative soul, and a truly creative soul is a productive soul. Babies know how to rest. Take time to rest, time to play. This is something I have in my backyard. It's sacred geometry, and basically you take your shirt off, take your clothes off, get sun all over your body, breathe in the air, put your feet on the earth, so you're taking in the earth energy and releasing the negativity that we build up in our electrified world, and meditate. And all these tools, as we apply them, we have greater chance of health and fulfillment. The simple intention to rest consistently applied turns the valley of the shadow into sweet surrender. I love that term, sweet surrender. Sometimes you need to step outside, get some fresh air, and remind yourself of who you are and who you want to be. Just taking in the breath. This is back when the skies were blue. Of the total 8 billion worldwide deaths per year from air pollution, over half are said to have been caused from indoor air pollution. It's important to take note of what's going on inside of your home and take the necessary steps to have a healthy home environment. That's where you spend a lot of your time, so be good to yourself. So there's something sweet about the fresh air and beauty of nature. And you could join your friends and do some stretching out there. Or with your significant other, with your personal friend. Look, when you're walking, you get the fresh air, you get the sunshine, you get the exercise, and you get the companionship. Exchange of ideas. Not bad. People should exercise regularly. It's important, especially as we get older. It's also something you can do with your family. The family that exercises together gets healthy together. And back in the day, I remember watching my mom watching Jack LaLanne on TV. He had an exercise show, very popular. He was a man that in his, I think, 20s, he was very sick. And he decided he wasn't going to be sick anymore, and he would take steps to change that. So he began to exercise regularly and replace bad foods, devitalized foods with natural foods. And he became the king of exercise. And exercise is king, nutrition is queen. Put them together and you've got a kingdom. So he advocated kicking the junk food away. So exercise, healthy, fresh food. These are the things we can do, as my mother would say, to transform humanity, to build the solid foundation for a healthy exchange, harmonious communities. So this goes hand in hand with the last lecture, I think. So getting back to sacred geometry, we have the golden rectangle. So one side is, A is 1 and B is 1.618. Remember, we just found that, well, I gave you a quick overview, but as things grow, they grow in that progression. And then there's a fraction that forms from that, and you have the golden mean. So the ratio of the length of the entire line A to the length of the larger line segment B is the same as the ratio of the length of the larger line segment B to the length of the smaller line segment C. This happens only at the point where A is 1.618 times B, and B is 1.618 times C. Alternatively, C is 0.618 of B, and B is 0.618 of A. It's a progression. It's a ratio, and we find it all over. We find it in the lemon, in our bodies, and of course, big corporations, they always jump at the chance to make more money, so they have used the golden mean ratio in their advertising, in their logos. Adidas, Toyota, Cadillac. This is in Paris, you were there, Eiffel Tower. In ancient Egypt, they used it in art. Nefertiti. In the golden rectangles throughout the structure of the Parthenon in ancient Greece. Basically, in ancient Greece, all of their art, architecture, and sculpture was based on the divine proportion. And then in ancient Rome, they got away from that, and they got more militaristic, and the music was very militaristic, and I think this tended to contribute to the fall of Rome. Not the only reason, but the art and the culture plays a significant role in the situation. I took this presentation to Oaxaca about 5 or 6 years ago, and I had a translator. He was like a United Nations translator. Whenever I speak in English, he would translate immediately into Spanish, and when people asked questions in Spanish, they would translate to English, and we all had headphones. It was very exciting. And so I added some pictures from the Mayan culture. Divine proportion, golden mean. See the proportion in the bodies. This is an interesting picture. Why does Jessica Simpson seem so beautiful in this picture? Well, her face is very, very close to the divine proportion. The length of the nose, position of her eyes, the length of the chin, all conform to some aspect of the golden ratio. Her innate beauty is based on divine proportion. And here's a Latina girl who has that also. We all have a basic connection to the divine proportion. Some of us, remember, like the line goes over and under as it gets higher and higher? Well, some of us have a closer relationship to it, and some of us, it's not so much. So divine proportion definitely has a connection to beauty. Golden ratio working in the human body. Sculpture. The Renaissance, well, when Rome fell, Europe went into sort of like dark ages for a while, and it wasn't until the Renaissance, which was a period of scientific revolution and artistic transformation, that occurred at the end of the Middle Ages and start of the modern age, 14th century Europe and Italy, and 16th century in Northern Europe. So Da Vinci is the one that brought the divine proportion back into art and culture. There's his Dionysian man, and there he did a self-portrait and some of his sculpture. Mona Lisa, divine proportion. These are all his art. The golden mean proportion in the Last Supper. The way things are spaced has to do with the proportion. And then what we have here is the Vesica Pisces. Basically, when you take a circle and then you add another circle with the same radii to the first circle, and the second circle goes through the center of the first circle, you have Vesica Pisces. It showed up as a crop circle, and our eyes are based on Vesica Pisces. We're able to see with the electromagnetism in the eye. You are an aperture through which the universe is looking at and exploring itself. Eyes are the windows to the soul. And the vagina is the womb of creation from which all things are born. That's a Vesica Pisces also. You have a egg that's fertilized by the sperm, and that forms a zygote, and it divides in 2, then it divides in 4, and then it divides in 8. Up to that point, we're all the same. We're all the same, no difference. But then something happens. It's called the blast. And that's when we begin the process of individualization. We start to become our own unique selves. We're all the same, all a little different. And here's a young lady who had it all together. So in the Muslim culture, they weren't allowed to draw the human body. They considered that a graven image. So they developed the sacred geometry, the Persian rugs, the sacred designs. They're very famous for it. And then the Tibetans are also famous for their mandalas. Sanskrit means circle or center. They're famous for the sand paintings which are destroyed upon completion. This is the Merkaba. And if you go three-dimensional on that, we have a Merkaba around our body. Drum below Melchizedek, who was my first sacred geometry teacher, he developed the Merkaba meditation, which is, he claimed, a way to develop the Merkaba around our body so we can travel through the dimensions in our light body. And I believe you can go on YouTube, and there's a Merkaba meditation that's about 7 minutes long. And if you work on that over time, you may experience that. Personally, it was a little bit too complex for me. It had a lot of steps, but some people like complexity. We have a Merkaba there. And so the Tibetans, they developed their sand paintings. It became a big ritual. Some lamas spend their whole lives developing this. They spend days creating these mandalas. And then, when it's all said and done, they go, whoosh, and it's from dust to dust. They're basically little tiny crystals of different colors. And here today, gone to Maui. This is an 8th dimensional mandala called a holotope. And if you look at it, it's in one way it seems like just a picture, but if you really, really look at it, it seems like it starts to move. Sort of a dimensional shift kind of thing. And who's that famous channeler? Bashar. He uses this mandala at the end of a lot of his presentations. Another mandala, beautiful creations. And another mandala, or sacred design, is the mystical concept of the interconnectedness of all life. It's the tree of life. And of course, I have a tree of life pendant. And you can live your life from the tree of knowledge, which is good and evil, right and wrong, up and down, good and bad. Tree of knowledge connecting to heaven and the underworld, and the tree of life connecting to all forms of creation. The tree of life is more universal. Wisdom is the tree of life to them they hold upon her, and happy in every way that holdeth her fast. My understanding is that when you raise your consciousness enough, you raise yourself out of the duality to the extent that you live in a state of grace, like the 6th dimension, the miraculous, and you're given more freedom to be more godlike, more freedom to serve in a more godlike way. It's interesting. And So it's a nice thing to raise yourself up, to work on your consciousness. Here's a beautiful tree. And the Navajos also perform ritual. The singer creates patterns that are often circular, and the sand paintings are destroyed after the singing is finished. And we have sacred geometry in many cultures. I think New Zealand and the Aztecs, the Aztec calendar, and the Dreamtime art of the Aborigines in Australia. We have the Bagua symbol, another symbol, sacred geometry symbol for balance. More than 20 centuries ago, the Taoist sage Lao Tzu described creator creation this way: there is something formless and perfect before the universe was born. It is serene, empty, solitary, unchanging, infinite, eternally present. It is the mother of the universe. For lack of a better name, it is called the Tao. Use it to do the will of the divine creator and follow your intuition. This is the best we can do. So surrender and follow your highest possibility. And of course, we have a yin-yang double dragon representing the Taoist tradition. And the different cultures and their spirals. Golden means spirals, again, the art, tattoos. Our Chur boys of Ecuador, that's the second largest indigenous tribe in Ecuador. And I went on a 2-week trip to the Amazon rainforest with a shaman from this tribe. Very interesting experience. That's for another talk. Lady from the tribe. And then we have in Europe, we had the rose windows of the medieval cathedrals of Europe, and the ceilings and the architecture and the stained glass. In India, the beautiful patterns. You see these everywhere throughout India. I went about 4 years ago. If you haven't gone, it's another world. It's amazing. Either love it or you hate it, but it'll open your eyes. And then we have the pyramid, Teotihuacan, the Pyramid of the Sun. I was meditating on this just before the harmonic convergence, and they had to kick me out because they were closing. And I was on the top of this pyramid, and I got the idea to create spiritual gatherings in my home every week, and came back home and started a group called Transformational Friends of Santa Monica. We met every Wednesday night for a year and a half. I met my wife Pauline at that time, and we did half-hour silent meditations, had introductions, everybody announced their presence and what they were into, and then we had speakers and good food. The idea was that anybody that walked into my home would be uplifted on all levels, and a lot of good connections. Those were the days. Now I have an internet. I have Sacred Friends community online, and I send out email blasts about events and ideas and articles, and people seem to really like it. If you're interested, you can go to sacredfriends.org and sign up. And then we have Palenque, we have Machu Picchu, we have Galapagos, we have ancient Egypt, and before they would enter the pyramids, they would have sometimes the labyrinth. The labyrinth would help to unwind your mind and prepare you for entering the sacred temple. And I have, of course, the labyrinth pendant. The one on the right is Chartres Cathedral. And then, of course, we have the fractal. Fractal is a shape that can be split into parts. It's basically the same shape, different sizes, larger and smaller. And it's very interesting. I'm sort of running out of time. This is a fractal art. That's Mandelbrot. It was developed on computer graphics, larger and smaller, concentric. So sort of the smaller is the same as the larger in shape, just different in size. And we have the fractals in different, well, that's not really a vegetable, but it's colorful. cabbage. And we have fractals throughout our body. This is the bloodstream. This is the lungs. Trees are the lungs of the earth. Know thyself to boldly go where no one has gone before, towards the inner neutral universe of the human brain and mind. So this person decides he doesn't want to learn anything. He wants to keep his head in the sand. And that's how he's comfortable, he or she. I think it's a he. And these days, we're not allowed to say, right? Anyways, this is another person who decides to reach out to a higher being, a whale. It's a choice. It's always a choice. This is architecture in Japan. They do things in harmony with nature. So we have fractals. This is a very interesting picture. It's the rainforest. If you look at it one way, it's totally chaotic, confusion. But you look at it another way, everything is in harmony. It's working together in a pattern which expresses the beauty and exquisiteness of nature. So it's a paradox. One way it's confusion, another way it's harmony. How do we make peace with that paradox? That's life. We all have to deal with that paradox. This is the nervous system. Just like in nature, it has its own nervous system. Leaves, waterfalls, seashore, all fractals. From a higher perspective, the climate, golden mean spirals, how everything relates to everything else. It's all coordinated. The earth, how the planets revolve around each other, the galaxy. So this is a neuron on the right, and then the universe on the left. And if you notice, they're the same. As above, so below, the macrocosm, the microcosm. It's all interrelated. It's all about oneness. Brain cell, the universe, our heavens. The whole universe exists inside you. Ask all from yourself. This was probably a picture that someone did when they were on ayahuasca. So we are infinitely powerful. We can hold the moon with the backs of our hands, on our feet, on a finger, between our hands. We can share it. And we have this infinite healing power in our hands. And the more we use it, the more it develops. I've been doing Reiki for over 30 years. And when I do it more, it enhances it. And we all have the capacity. Snowflakes, they're all different, and yet they're all hexagons. Self-similarity. That's a molecule. This is an atom. Looks like the universe, doesn't it? And then cymatics. Cymatics is the relationship developed by Dr. Jenny from the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, who was a very amazing spiritual teacher in the 1800s, started the Waldorf schools, and taught us how to grow things better in nature. Anyways, what he did was he took a glass plate and he blasted it with sound. And there was sand on top of the plate, and each sound took on a specific pattern according to the sound. And there was definite correlation between the sound and the pattern, and it was repeatable, which makes it scientifically equitable. So each of these is from a specific sound. You can look up cymatics online and YouTube, and you can get all kinds of information. These are the notes of the piano. They each have their own patterns. And these are some animals have taken on their skins according to cymatics. And lastly, we're going to close with Sri Yantra, which is the most powerful of all known geometric power symbols. It represents the Om vibration, which is the creation energy of the universe. That's the first pendant I ever wore. And this is the essence of my talk right here. A human being is a part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He or she experiences themselves, their thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of their consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. When you go to the mall, 19 out of 20 people could care less about you. They just want to buy what they need for the family and their friends. And 1 out of 20 will look at you and they'll really see you as a brother, not a stranger, but a brother or a sister. And so Einstein is saying our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Nobody is able to achieve this completely. A lot of us fall into the lack of oneness consciousness many times during the day, but as we open up, but then if we're striving for the achievement is in itself a part of the liberation and foundation for inner security. We need to constantly strive to get back to this oneness. We go down the road of life, we meditate, we have amazing inner visions. And what do we do with that? Do we form beautiful mandalas? Do we create light and love and shine our light throughout the universe? We see the beauty and harmony of nature, the heart and our surroundings. Open our hearts, shine our light, and become the Sri Yantra. Become a Sri Yantra. Let the love and light shine through you. Experience the oneness. Get to the heart of the matter and make it work for you and all those that cross your path on a daily basis. Amen.